everyone. Happy to be here. Nice to see all of you. OK, so with Gen AI here, we have been talking a lot about conversant and infinite design systems, right, that can adapt to anything. But designing flexible systems has been around for a very long time. And I'm going to talk about my journey with this. I'm going to take you on a bit of a narrative story, really about how the best design systems have always been bulletproofed for infinity, designed to handle infinite inputs, infinite needs, and infinite expressions. This is some eye candy from a video made a very long time ago. Maybe some of you have seen it, about an infinitely flexible color system. OK, so I'm going to go way back. We're going to do some grounding. Design systems in our industry were created to teach people how to use the internet, how to use different types of software. Let's think about the internet in the early 90s. Honestly, we were not doing much with connected interfaces in the late 90s, right? We were clicking on blue words and reading things. But then more capabilities came online, right? Picking things and confirming things and navigating to things. Oops. There we go. Navigating with much more depth, and we needed these consistent metaphors so that people understood how to get things done. Buttons have always been things you press to make something happen. Forms are things you fill out to exchange information. Tabs organize your taxes from your kids' artwork, right? Systems design in our industry is still mostly about matching these analog metaphors to just get things done. And the best systems help you get many, many things done. So I'm going to dive into infinite systems, and I'm going to start with my experience with material design. So material design, as a reminder, was Google's first design system. And it really had been originally created to unify apps, mostly across Android and Google. The original goal was based on intents. How do people know where to go to get something done on Android? A fab button. How do people always understand what they're looking at? A header. But when I was leading the systems team for material after this first launch, we realized once we had nailed these basic metaphors, the next generation of software systems was not about this homogeneity. It was really about infinite possibility. So hence, the second version of material design was about flexing the system to infinite expressive potential, which led into all of the expressiveness in the system that followed. Really, once we had determined those basic metaphors, and this is pretty old work, so we're checking out some old stuff here. The basic metaphors in the system, we really pushed the metaphors through infinite expressiveness, took all the baseline of the original material design, and really looked at what we could do with it. But I think one of the most important things we did a long, long time ago was really focused on encoding tokens and variables into the metaphors, really activating code, so that every attribute in the system could flex, recompose, restyle, et cetera, into the components themselves in real code. Another really important thing that we did this time around was we fortified the flexibility and tooling. As you may note, sorry, Figma, we thought that Sketch was going to be the right move. Obviously, it didn't turn out to happen. To really encourage the expressive playfulness and thoughtfulness and understanding of how do flexible systems actually work. Most importantly, during this time, though, I remember a lot of conversations we had with our design team as we were introducing this expressive flexibility. And we were basically like, what about functional flexibility? Like, remember the origins for a button? A button isn't a button. It's just a way to make a choice. A radio button is also just a way to make a choice. And a checkbox is still just a way to make a choice. They were all just different ways of making choices. And what if we could simply tell a system, I need a design that lets someone make a choice for this question? That thought, that naming and structuring things based on needs, semantic design systems, could one day unlock intent-driven design, felt a little wild at the time. But that's inherently what we were always doing with design systems. We were matching a metaphor to a need. So that ability to start showing a system that could function for everything brought me to Nest, to originally lead the design team to figure out ambient computing in the home. And so ambient computing, conceptually at the core, is the concept of computing that is all around you, available whenever you need it, invisible when you don't need it. Computing that would ultimately be responsive to human intent and human needs. So for example, in this video, the dad wants to monitor his baby without being glued to a device. Peace of mind without complete devoted attention. Computing paying attention to you. And ambient computing at the core was really about orchestrating human needs to device behavior. Like the baby monitor in the video before, something like lighting, the system had to anticipate human behavior, surface the right control, and then disappear when it wasn't needed, turning on lights at exactly the right moment, but whatever that moment specifically was for you. This was a massive design system challenge. How do you create a multimodal system that could flex across screens and modes and allow for infinite behaviors across infinite devices in the home? So really, originally, we landed on a system based on a little tile. It was a toggle, and it was a slider, and it was a button, and it was really a massive state-based information system. A component that could expand and contract to an infinite ecosystem of control and exist across voice and touch, and both combined. So that little tile became a metaphor for so much control in the home, for an infinite number of potential devices that could be in the home, and it prompted a pretty large redesign of the Google Home app. And the goal was always to create control interfaces that were needs-based and really composable for users, and also for device makers. We wanted them to plug into the app and be able to say, I've got a fan, and I need a controller that can change the speed, change the temperature, flip from hot to cold, and the tiles would understand that needs and compose an interface. For users, we also believed in this composability. They should be able to create their own interfaces easily. And I think a great example of that is really about automation. Instead of having to know the building blocks, historically how to build automations in the home, super wonky, understanding buttons and sliders and forms and the if this then that flow that you needed to make home devices work for you, why couldn't you just state your need? And the interface would just appear. And this is what generative AI unlocked for automation in the home. Needs to built interfaces and actions. OK, I'm going to hop into another place, another company thinking about homes. So the concept of the Google Home team of really revealing the right moment of the design system at exactly the right time carried into a lot of the work that I led when I was at Airbnb. When I came to Airbnb, like the material design team before, the system had been a pretty inflexible representation of a moment in time. And now it felt pretty dated. So I came in 2023, and this is the design system that was still fundamentally in place from 2019. So we put some super strong stakes in the ground around a very opinionated and updated version of the Airbnb design system, like insanely strong and very specific stakes in the ground about specific details, going into so much depth around the lighting and textures and materials, environments, et cetera. This is some of the iconography work we did. The opinions were really strong, with seemingly pretty inflexible rules, very specific materials and overlays and specific layouts, cards, typography, et cetera. It was very opinionated. But, like I learned in material many years before, a system needs to always be infinitely flexible. Because a design system, even for a single product, is always just a moment in time on a continuous spectrum of design. So if we went back 10 years ago for Airbnb, it was some moment in time as well. Really, the same vehicles of intent were there, right? Cards, button tabs, they were all still in the system. So even for a single brand like Airbnb, you are always designing that system for a point in time, a system that really should flex to infinity. So we made sure, like we did for material, that the system was built to inherit the next generation of expressiveness and code, and bulletproofed it from getting stuck in the future. So we really made the underlying code foundation and the design philosophy of how we built systems at Airbnb different and more flexible. The most exciting flexibility, beyond the expressiveness that we originally brought to Airbnb, was really the content and intent flexibility that we brought. So we made cards the ultimate vehicle for intent in the travel product. Cards that could help you pay, cards that would immerse you, cards that could dynamically compose in infinite ways based on your needs as a traveler. And this was really the design system that was starting to prepare for infinite ways a traveler might need to engage with the product, and really starting to show some of the original ideas around dynamic composition for travel. So this leads me to where I am now, my current chapter. I recently took over as the head of design at Expedia about 2 months ago. It's one of the most complex and interesting travel portfolios, I think, in our industry. So to ground you all, Expedia has 3 flagship brands and a massive long tail of brands around the world. Therefore, the design system needs to be very formidable, right? It needs to flex across many, many product lines. Also, the company has a lot of the ingredients for full trip planning, right? Flights, cars, stays, activities, partnerships. All of these different businesses come together within the product suite as well. And because of this complex portfolio, Expedia is looking at both the concepts of infinite visual flexibility and infinite functionality for travelers. So because the system had to historically support so many brands, there's now way too much homogeneity between a lot of the core brands. They simply look too much of the same. So we've been exploring this visually, right? Shifting sameness into more distinctness, right? So we've been building prototypes that showcase some of these potential style shifts, connecting, these components, but similar travel needs across the portfolios. And we're building capabilities in Figma. Excited to use some of the newer capabilities to really sort of swap instances and see sort of the visual attributes of some of these core components change. A lot more visual exploration is coming here, but it boils down to making sure we have a very strong foundation of testing and play using real code and using tools. But the part that's most exciting to me is what we're doing that is going to come next. Our plan and the work that we're doing now is to make the entire underlying design system for Expedia Group completely machine readable for vibe coding and prototyping, but most interestingly, how we might be able to use that in real time in product. The system should eventually be able to recompose itself based on context and user intent and personalization. Semantics into the system so that travel can actually become totally personal. Let's kind of talk about what that means. So let's take a look at this grid. It represents the type of information a traveler might want to know in terms of selecting a hotel for the weekend, right? Highlights, menu items, locations, prices, all of this information that you think about when you're selecting a place to stay. But maybe I'm someone who specifically cares about a great pool and a great gym under $400, and I want to be near a park. And that's what I truly care about when I travel. But maybe I'm someone who cares about a spa and a free breakfast and wants the vibes at the lobby to be specific for a meeting. Right now, all of the results that you get when you're searching for this type of thing look the same. But the future is going to be hyper-personalized and super dynamic, and it's going to be a system of patterns and components coming together, understanding my needs to give me the right results. It's not going to be necessarily modular stacks like this. There's going to be integrated interfaces powered by these composable design systems that feel crafted just for me. And we're just starting to explore that, and we're going to get there. An initial example for me is for this crafted for me feeling is a concept we're kind of playing with and looking at in maps right now. In most products, map UI is pretty consistent. You don't get dramatically different experiences based on different types of inputs. But with a more semantic design language and understanding the inputs better and much more personalization, you should see different experiences powered by design systems that understand what you need. You got to meet users where they're at, ideally, in the flow. On the left, we know the specific location and amenities that they made. But on the right, they're still in sort of an initial discovery mode about what's cool in New York. And the experiences should be personalized and different for them. We've been testing some of this thinking through our recent work with OpenAI and ChatGPT, building one of the first apps inside of their platform. It is an incredible sandbox to explore the next generation of conversational, intent-based interactions and the visual systems that really support that. This is a desktop example of a hotel discovery flow that we built in GPT. So originally, we built out intent-based cards that would flex depending on hierarchy of importance. So for example, this is a carousel card for sort of multiple results, a larger card for more of a kind of a defined single result, and these smaller cards that we originally put on maps. The cards would flex, ideally based on what you asked for in ChatGPT. A simple detail card for just a basic query, or maybe a card that could build just a tiny bit more context if you asked about reviews or additional information, or a card that might be able to grow if you asked specifically about amenities, right? So flexing and contracting based on what your actual input was. But even as we were designing for this very conversational and pretty new type of experience, we were honestly still using the same product design paradigms we have now. Carousels, right? Cards, yes. Yes, the cards we made were contracting and expanding slightly, but the paradigm was still pretty static. It was carousels. It was fixed UI. This canvas maybe isn't yet truly realizing composable, dynamic, and personalized interfaces in the same way that the written content that you experience in ChatGPT is hyper-personalized. We're not quite there with product design, but you can really see the future coming into play. And we could see this opportunity in small ways. So there was this one moment when we were starting to look at a little bit of the dynamic UI coming into play. We were looking at flight results, right? And how would we display flight results in this experience? And we started talking with the team around sort of these little dynamic filter chips in flight results. It's a really old school metaphor to sort content. And at first we were sort of like, why would we put chips, filter chips on this really new conversant UI? Filtering should be conversational, right? But flight options are really complicated, and sometimes you don't exactly know what you want. And conversation is not always the best interaction material to use. Sometimes old school filters, old school metaphors with dynamic content are really the best. Remember, it's really about just matching a metaphor to a human need. Okay, so I went through a lot of different projects and moments of how a design system have always been built for infinity, infinite expressiveness with infinite containers for human needs. So if you could take away a few things from this talk, I would say always try and understand human needs to define a system for human needs. Think about the needs people have with your product, right? For travel, people want to find their vibes. They want to make finding fun really easy. They want to feel value for what they're searching for and how might they find that value. So how might your system flex to really meet people where they're at in terms of the needs for your experiences? Really remember that everything you make is a metaphor. This will allow you to prepare for the future, right? Components and styles and all the system things, really they are vehicles of intent versus just buttons and switches and rows and type scales. This is going to allow the interface of the future to be much more personal and much more relevant and much more dynamically composed. And lastly, think of a system as a living, breathing thing. A system is really a moment in time, and it's the entire timeline, right? Create a system that is perfect for both right now and a snapshot on time, but it's also a malleable material to be able to prepare you for the future. So thank you very much.